How big of a setback is this for the U.S. program?
Yeah, it's a setback for sure. We'll get into B.J. Callaghan in a second, but what kind of offer must have came on the lap of Anthony Hudson for him to say, I don't want the opportunity to coach a national team in 2 competitions over the summer? What would he have thought of his chances there or the status of the pool in this summer's competitions for him to say, you know what, I don't even want to take the chance of my stock going up anymore. This is a good enough offer in the Middle East that I want to go with this. I'd rather do this than see where 2 national team competitions can take me. So that's worrisome for me, right? Right there. And the man stepping into this, B.J. Callaghan, he was, if you will, he's the assistant to the assistant, right? It's an office level type of meme. So he was tapped as the assistant coach and strategy analyst under Greg Berhalter. And here with Anthony Hudson, he was his number 2. He was the assistant to Anthony Hudson. So anytime there's a change for players, there's an adjustment. And we spoke about this with Anthony Hudson. The players, will they view him more than just a caretaker? Now you're heading to competitions. You're heading to competitions this summer, too, with players, a lot of whom aren't at a great level, are coming in abysmal form, club form. Some just got relegated. Some may get relegated. Some are in the worst form of their career. Some are, for the first time, going through things, that they've never gone through before. How will they respond to an assistant caretaker? This is just adding on to the case. If there was whispers, murmurs of where this program was at, if there was any doubt of if they were favorites or not, I don't see them favorites heading into either of the summer tournaments.
So it's interesting. You see this as an indictment almost on the quality of not even the main job at U.S. Soccer, but even the interim job. Like, you think if Hudson thought he had a shot to win, that he would stick around. I see it differently, Herc.
Well,
I think if you know you're the interim,
let me just really quickly.
But if you know you're the interim, Herc, why not take a job that's a job in hand? If you know you can go to the Middle East and have an opportunity, you're obviously not going to stick around to just play out the string.
So let's just peel it back for a second, because I agree with you. And something in hand, and you can't fault Anthony Hudson at all for taking his chance. He parlayed the 5 games into what he could, made the most of it. He has the opportunity, fine. But if Christian Pulisic was just coming off a stellar season, if the Leeds boys weren't relegated and they all participated, if Weston had a good loan, if Timothy Weah wasn't as a right back, if Yunus Musa wasn't fighting relegation and playing well, if all these different players like Giovanni Reina was having a good season, if Tim Ream was still healthy, you know, I don't know why, but I think this would be different. I think Anthony Hudson thinks twice about this. He doesn't make the decision now because, quite frankly, how much would his stock go down if he lost these 2 competitions? He's the caretaker. He could still take the job after.
Well, but if you think losing the competitions wouldn't hurt his stock, like, how much would winning them help? He's already rehabilitated.
Winning it would absolutely help.
He's rehabilitated.
Could you imagine if he won both competitions? Oh, I don't think we're talking Middle East club. I think we're talking something else.
Okay. Let's focus on the guy who will be in charge, B.J. Callaghan, because this is very interesting to me. This is a guy who, as you mentioned, was kind of the assistant to the assistant, right? Pretty far down the pecking order under Greg Berhalter. He's now going to get not just the Nations League, Herc, but the Gold Cup as well. When you compare his resume then to Diego Coca, I mean, that's a significant disadvantage for the U.S. team in the Nations League semifinal specifically, isn't it?
Absolutely. What coaching experience does he have at the professional level? His own coaching experience, him making the decisions, because you could say, well, it's essentially the same thing. No, it's not. Was Anthony Hudson's style and approach different from Greg Berhalter's? Yes, it was. It absolutely was.
How different? How different?
In everything. The way he spoke to the players, the way he spoke to the press, the way he managed the team. He was a little bit more free-flowing, not as much, handcuffs on the team. You have to be.
We heard that.
Yes.
We heard that.
So you have to assume B.J. Callaghan would like to make his own decisions. So we don't know what those decisions would be. Now, you mentioned Diego Coca. There's also John Herdman. There's quality coaches, Christensen, in this competition, in the Final Four, and also heading into the Gold Cup. The way the players will view you, it is tricky. This tells me right now that U.S. Soccer is saying, we win or lose Nations League, we win or lose Gold Cup, that doesn't matter. What matters right now is we get it right. We get it right for the future.
Is that the right approach?
And that could be fair. Could be fair. You are in a position of luxury because Mexico doesn't have that position. Mexico doesn't have that luxury. Diego Coca loses these 2 tournaments, he's probably gone. He's most likely gone. They don't have the luxury that the U.S. does. So this tells me they're saying, you know what? This is in our best interest. We'll let it ride. We'll see what happens in these 2 competitions, and then we make the best possible choice going forward. If that's the case, which I hope it is, great. But if you do all this to land on Jesse Marsch or to eventually land on Greg Berhalter, like, wow, that's when I would be really, what are we doing?
Yeah. Do you think if you're U.S. soccer and you've already got Jesse Marsch waiting in the wings, you now say, well, all right, listen, we were comfortable with Hudson going through the Gold Cup. B.J. Callaghan, maybe not so much. No offense to B.J. Callaghan, but he doesn't have even Hudson's resume. Do you then bring in Marsch for the Gold Cup and just get him in? If you're going to hire him anyway?
Well, if you were going to hire him anyway, you would have done it, right? I mean, there's no going back on
this now. There's a difference
now.
between letting the interim and then the interim's interim, right?
Of course, Seb. Of course, Seb. But I think they're calling these 2 competitions a wash. That's the only thing that I can fathom, the only thing that makes sense, and they can hang their hat on. Listen, that's important, but not as important as getting it right for 2026. And I will concede. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? About Mexico, I actually was looking at their statement, the release from U.S. Soccer, and they had a quote in there from Tim Ream. He said a couple of things very interesting. Quote, nothing changes. Messaging and ideas stay the same. If you're a U.S. fan and you're looking for hope, the one set of ideas that Greg Berhalter consistently got right, Herc, were his ideas against Mexico. So if you're going to have the same ideas that Berhalter was putting out against Mexico, every single time he went up against El Tri, different coach then, he got the better of Tata Martino. So if it's the same game plan, at least June 15th against Mexico, you figure that could still work.
All right, well, let's turn it around. What happens after when they face Canada in the final? How'd that go?
We'll see. We'll see. Hey, but Greg, I mean, you can't argue Greg Berhalter's record against Mexico, and I don't think B.J. Callaghan's too different than Greg Berhalter. I don't think Hudson was that different.
I don't know. That's being disingenuous to Greg Berhalter and what he did against those teams, and I'm being honest. What I will say is, and there's a quote in here from B.J. Callaghan, he's a culture and glue guy, he calls himself. I take a lot of pride in making sure everyone feels connected to the team and is contributing to the culture of the group. I always viewed myself as the glue and someone who's supporting the message coming from the head coach. With 2 important competitions approaching this summer, he's talking about the culture of the team, right? He went on to talk about that culture and facilitating that culture like he did in the World Cup. There are those out there who would argue they didn't like the culture that was around during the World Cup. They didn't like what they saw out of the U.S. men's national team, the murmurs inside and the explosion afterwards, that culture within the group.
There is also, to be fair, quite a few people who have said great chemistry within the group.
Sure.
So 2 sides to every story.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.